Do you think that we are already far enough in this journey of educating the community about headphones measurements?
No, we're just barely scratching the surface. We are at the tail end of an antiquated paradigm when it comes to looking at, understanding, reading headphone measurement graphs.
Maybe that is the next step, agreeing that it's not a line, it is a range.
Yeah, that's certainly what that aligns with the kind of thing that we're trying to put out there.
The workload getting higher and higher, so you're spending less and less time with any one particular product. I'm questioning your ability, or how do you feel?
Yeah, this is it's an interesting question because it gets into.
Hello everyone, welcome to another Ola Chat episode. This one is slightly different. I know I do say that every single time, but this time we do have a YouTuber, someone who knows really a lot about headphones and the science behind headphones as well. So I'm very intrigued. Andrew Park, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Andrew, if someone is to meet with you somewhere and ask you, what do you do, Andre, who you are, what do you say?
I lie. No, I'm just kidding. It's very difficult because on the one hand, I could say I do YouTube, but that it doesn't really describe what I actually do and where most of my focus is, like for the time that I spend working. I would say on our channel, what we do is we focus a ton on measurements, understanding, how headphones should measure, different ways that, we might find good in headphones. But then also how headphones behave. So I would say I tell people, yes, that I do YouTube as my job. But that's usually the start of the conversation, not the end of it.
But I do think that, at least that would be my perception, that in the past decade or so, through YouTube channels and yourself and others as well, this topic kind of get a little bit more light, a little bit more attention. And I do think that, doing this kind of edutainment videos in a way, educated the consumers and, in our case, our community, they are audio engineers. They might know a little bit more about audio in general. But when it comes to headphones and measuring headphones, it's totally different than measuring a room. It's everything is flipped. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, do you think that we are already, far enough in this journey of educating the community about headphones measurements?
No, we're just barely scratching the surface. In fact, in many ways, the measurements side of things has gone in kind of I don't want to say it's gone in a wrong direction, because there's certainly been a lot of progress that's been made over the last 10 years or so in measurements. But we are, I would say, at the tail end of an antiquated paradigm when it comes to looking at, understanding, reading headphone measurement graphs. And really, the sort of typical depictions that we see of headphone measurements and headphone data are bound to lead people to the wrong conclusions about how these products actually perform. And I say this as somebody who is full tilt into the headphone measurement space. So what we really are trying to do now at the end of this, I say at the end of it, who knows what will actually happen, but it's my feeling at least that once we start, pushing into understanding headphone measurements from additional viewpoints, additional perspectives, and get a greater picture of them, this will sort of supersede or, replace the antiquated, outdated, and in my opinion, erroneous views of headphone measurement data, which is, the stuff that we see now, the single line on a graph against a target kind of stuff. And so for that reason, I say we've barely begin to understand how these devices perform. And also that limitation is in a way crystallized by the community's understanding. Like it's the kind of thing where when people start to understand a little bit, they then focus so much on that, even though there's so much more to still understand. And so, I'm hopeful that we can kind of get past the existing inertia that we see in headphone measurements to be able to understand this stuff quite a bit better.
Yeah, I agree. I do master classes as All Audio. We go around and we try to present our products, of course. And when I talk to these engineers, they get confused quite quickly about measurements and stuff like that. So over time, I've developed this kind of like a slide. On one side, I have this kind of like the scientific reference points, like, the speed of sound, the speed of light, or I don't know, mass or whatever. So something that is scientifically very accurate and very well defined in a physical world. And then I have like the middle ground, which is a great example would be the hearing threshold. Right, we are saying it's 20 micropascals, but in reality, for you it could be 18, for me it could be 30. It's not scientific reference that applies to everyone. But we have agreed on using that in order to have a reference point so that we can, have a debate, we can communicate, we can measure something based on the agreed reference point. And then on the right side of the slide, I have the whole mess of the measuring headphones and what is flat. And so that's where they start to nod a little bit and kind of get the idea why things are all over the place and why brands, we are a brand, we're kind of fighting for this space in their mind in this way, like, hey, we do perfectly flat products, but obviously we're not the only one. And the nice thing that happens there is that I present the measurements from all the famous ear simulators like the KIU, the Graz, the Behringer, Kiar, and so on. And they kind of see the idea that these microphones capture things in a different way. So then it's a lot easier to sell the notion that flat is really not a single line on a chart. It's more like a range, which is what you guys have been talking about for the past few years quite extensively and showing that on your graphs as well. So maybe that is the next step, agreeing that it's not a line, it is a range, and defining a range could be similar to the hearing threshold. Maybe. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, that's certainly what that aligns with the kind of thing that we're trying to put out there. There's what you can measure and in terms of understanding how sound works. That's one thing, but the other side of it is understanding what sounds good. And I think that second part is a part that is the understanding of that is very limited. And the more research that gets done there, in terms of the kind of work that Dr. Olive had done, but also even before Dr. Olive's research, that's something where the more work that gets done there, the better picture we have of it. But for what has been done there, the understanding that we have is that it is a range, right? That what good is in terms of what sounds good, that is a range, and I think one of the other issues that we see that hasn't really made its way into the public consciousness yet when it comes to headphone measurements is how headphone behavior varies across individuals. And this is also one of the other contributing factors to why it makes sense to understand headphone performance in terms of a range. It's not just that, I like a peak that somebody else doesn't like, or vice versa. It's that, people are literally hearing these products differently. And so having a better understanding of how they hear these things differently, or how these, devices can vary in different ways across people's heads, gives us that broader picture, right? So the analogy that I like to go with, and this is, I'm shamelessly stealing this analogy from my colleague Blaine, the way that we're used to looking at headphone measurements, which is the single line on the graph kind of way, that's like taking a snapshot of something from one particular perspective or one particular angle. And really, what we want to do is take a snapshot from, all around it, from many different angles. And as you increase the different viewpoints and different perspectives of it, the better understanding you have of that thing.
Absolutely. I agree with that. There's a thought or a question that sparked while you were explaining this. Everything you said matters to professionals, even us as creators of products. Of course, we live and, we work kind of in the same industry. You're on that side, we are on this side. It's still the same thing, and we need to communicate and so on. But, how relevant is that to the final consumer? So when somebody is actually buying something, the quality of sound, understanding measurements, and interpreting all of that in order to get the idea, all right, that will probably sound good for me. Is that important? Do they really have to get all this knowledge to make the decision, or is that basically more like a return policy, like you have the 365 days return? And I guess at the end of the day, you do need to try it out to really know if it fits your style, your taste, your head, and so on. So it begs the question, how much we can push the scientific approach and the reviewer recommendations versus how much will it just stay good old and tried trial thing?
Yeah. It's a good question. I don't know that we, so I obviously work for headphones.com, and I don't know if the initial idea behind headphones.com's 365-day return policy was, to fit well with this idea of, the single line on the graph isn't enough. We need more perspectives thing. But it does happen to work out that way, where part of the outcome of understanding, how these products behave differently, and needing to get a better understanding of them beyond just, again, the traditional measurements that have been, cultivated, including from us. That fits, that aligns with the idea that they originally came up with, which was, what would be a headphone utopia where, you didn't need to worry about like, hey, is this the right thing for me? Right? You could actually have that experiential verification rather than needing to have this crazy knowledge, or some sort of, a super niche technical understanding of headphone measurement data, right? Where people could just try it. And then if they didn't like it, they could just, okay, not for me, right? I do think that as far as like what leads people's experiences, there are so many different factors, one of which though can be an understanding of measurements or how a product performs, right? And this is it's a motivator for people to buy products, but it's one of the things where we've also seen certain brands try to, overfit for the existing paradigm of headphone measurements, in the sense that they will design specifically to hit a certain, fairly well appreciated evaluative standard. And this can actually cause their products to sound worse because those evaluative standards are misunderstood. And but they know that this is something that's going to work for sales. Right. This is something that happens a lot in the Chinese manufacturer IEM space. So for in-ear headphones, where in many cases they were overfitting for Harman IE 2019, and this caused for a long time at least, so many products, like every new product was always that target, that same thing. Now, obviously, the reasoning was, well, this is going to be evaluated this way against this target, and we want to look good against this target, and because that's gonna motivate people to buy things. But at the same time, I think there's also all kinds of other motivators for what actually influences people's purchase decisions around headphones. Many of them are not conscious things. They're it's like everything to do with the story of the brand, right? Or the perceived expertise and craftspersonship, perceived expertise and craftsmanship to do with the products that they're making, the the look and the feel of the product, even price point is massive, and so all of those things I think coming together are contributive to the overall experience. The measurements and the data side of it is just one potential factor. That's sort of how I see it.
But how long have you been doing these things?
I've been doing this for at least 5 years, maybe 6. Yeah.
So, during that time, you've reviewed or compared a ton of products. And I do know that, from watching some of your videos, you try really hard to stay objective, or to at least have an objective side of the review and the subjective side of the review, which is, of course, great. But I'm wondering, over time, when you go through so many products, and even as your channel grew, I imagine, the workload getting higher and higher. So I'm assuming you're spending less and less time with any one particular product. So I'm questioning, how does that influence your ability, or how do you feel personally about delivering a recommendation, based on that fact, I guess?
Yeah, this is it's an interesting question, because it gets into almost like a question of like, what should evaluative standards be when it comes to the just the practice of reviewing a product, and should it try to be as close to what the experience would be like for a person who purchased it, whatever the thing is. And I think that's a worthwhile question to ask. I don't really have that strong of an opinion on it either way, because I think that there are ways in which you can, like, a person who just buys the product isn't going to measure it, and most likely. So there is a sense in which you're never going to be, using the product in the same way. But I do think it's worth at least considering, okay, who is going to buy this product, or who is potentially going to be interested in this product, and how are they going to use it? And I say this like also particularly because of like evaluating a lot of noise canceling headphones. That involves kind of a different use case from the traditional wired passive headphones. So having some sort of I guess at least consideration of that is fairly important. But I think you asked about the workload and how this maybe changes what a reviewer is able to do. I think it does, and it does limit a little bit the amount of time that they are able to focus on one product, because it is true. Like it's not just like there's more stuff to do. It's that there's or more products to cover. It's that there's each product requires more more measurements. Like we when we started, we were just doing measurements on one system, just on Gross, and now we try and do measurements on Gross, BNK528, on head, real human measurements, and then what we're actually measuring is also grown, right? So the evaluative process itself, even for a single product, has dramatically increased. And at the same time, we still want to be putting out videos at a regular cadence at the same amount of time. So, the actual time with the product and listening and comparing to other products has absolutely been condensed. But I think that this is something that my friend Critical talks about every once in a while. For those of us who've been doing this for such a long time, where we have that really long or large back catalog of products that we've reviewed, and particular familiarity with, I guess, industry staples. Like we've all heard HD600s, we've all heard the AKGs, the Bayer Dynamics. We have a good sense of how all those different products sound. That is very helpful in expediting the review process, making it so that we can be a lot more efficient with our understanding of, okay, put a headphone on. And quite frankly, within the first few minutes, we know, if there's a problem, we know. It gets a lot harder to determine, or I guess navigate the distance between good and great. Because sometimes you hear something, oh, this sounds pretty good, but then it takes a little bit longer to go, okay, how good is this? But if something is bad, we know right away. So there is an element of experience there that helps with that process for sure.
Absolutely. To continue down this path just a little bit more, do you think or believe or feel that you're somewhat influenced by other reviewers in the same space? Do they, somewhat influence your decisions on what products to cover, how to cover them? I know DMS joined you guys a while ago. So how does that work? How do you truly stay, true to yourself in a way?
Yeah. I think the answer to this is it's impossible to be completely impartial. Sorry, I'll say that again. I think the answer to this is that it's impossible to be completely impartial. I don't think that anybody can say, there is no outside influence from just other people, or even something as simple as, if somebody buys the product, that's an influence, right? The idea of other reviewers getting influenced by other reviewers, I would be lying if I said that there are there's no outside influence from other reviewers, right? Not necessarily when it comes to like how I feel about a product, but in terms of what I choose to cover or where the conversation goes. That's definitely true. If there's a product that other reviewers are hyping up, for example, I will want to cover that product because I will want to see, hey, is this good? And in a way, it kind of is like it's an indicator of where the conversation goes in the space. So yeah, I mean, I think it absolutely has an impact on what gets covered, not necessarily what gets said about it. Or how we feel about it, because for that we try and stay as impartial as we can. It's an effort to try and be as impartial as we can, but I don't know that it's ever fully able to be free from some sort of bias, right? Humans are always going to have some sort of bias.
So here's going to be like a silly question in a way, but with your experience and research mind, I'm sure you're going to understand it as intended. So who do you think you serve in terms of the community or us as the manufacturers and brands?
Yeah.
Because it's kind of like
100%. Yeah. 100% the community. That's always at the core of what we're doing. We are there to, like, we work, this is the way I think of it at least, we work for the community, not the industry, not the brands, not for, obviously I'm employed by headphones.com, who's a dealer, but we're not, we don't serve them, right? We've done it in a way where we have two very distinct sides of the company. There's the media arm, and then there's the e-commerce side of things. And we're, very much in the media arm. And there's often, tension between those two things, but we like to think of it as a healthy tension. We have that very strong separation of church and state. And so, for us, it's been like our North Star, I guess, as we say, is ensuring that, whatever we're doing is aiming at the truth. Truth and being trustworthy that's the name of the game. That's what we're all about. So yeah, in that sense, yeah, serving the community.
Absolutely. Is there like a vision for your channel going forward? Like what's going to happen in the next 5 years? Is there like, we're doing that, we're going this way? Is there something you can share on this note?
So I would say the big vision right now is to improve the evaluative methods. So I kind of think of it in terms of like short term, midterm, and long term. Short term, it's to improve, basically constantly try to improve evaluative methods. And we hope that this is something that can be adopted more widespread generally, like the things that we're working on. We'll see how the community reacts to it, right? Because you don't always know. Like we could roll something out and say, hey, check this way out. And then the community say, I hate that. That's sort of happened before, when we started showing more compensated graphs, less raw graphs, because we felt there were errors that happened a lot when reading raw graphs. But the community was like, no, we want the raw graphs in there. So we put them back in. But yeah, we were hopeful that the evaluative stuff that we're working on, changes to that, get understood by the community and then adopted. And so you may have seen again you mentioned before the ranges, right? So that's one of the examples. The midterm vision, I would say, is we want to do coverage of more speaker products. I think. We've focused a lot on headphones, and there's a lot of interesting stuff happening in headphones. But an area that we basically haven't touched is speakers. And so that seems like a fairly natural next step for us. Beyond that, for long term, this has to do more with, I guess, where we see ourselves in the, let's say, audio industry generally. And what our function is there, which is to try and bring as many people into the good experiences that we get to have as possible. So in a way, what we're doing here, like not just me, but like people who are reviewing headphones, we're kind of cheating because we get to have all these experiences with these products. We get a sense of what products are right for us in ways that most people never get a chance to, because they don't get to, try all these different things and compare all these different things. And so I would say the best thing we can do is to try and bring as many people to have these kinds of great experiences that we get to have. To try and hit as many people as possible.
When it comes to AI, okay, a flashy word, I get it. But at some point, I believe that a consumer or buyer will, type down a prompt and, get me the 5, best possible headphones for me, because the AI will know maybe a little 100%. Bit more about an individual. So there's this kind of like personalization happening in the review space for sure, probably even now, but that I'm not aware of. But in the courses of 5 years and something like that, this will likely be a reality. So that's why I asked about the vision. So if you're right now, quote unquote, selling your recommendations through YouTube and reviews, if that is to change, what's gonna happen with your line of work? Where's the core value gonna be for you guys?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's already the behavior for how people are discovering headphones products has changed dramatically even in the last year, to where now it would not surprise me if for most people the default approach is to use some sort of AI tool. And I did some digging into this recently, actually, just to see how good the results were. I want to say like 6 months ago, or maybe even like 4 months ago, the results were not good. In the last several months, I've been quite surprised at how good the results were. Like not just for like, what headphones to buy or anything like that, but like to get a sense of, just information about things, right? So, things like do cables matter, or understanding acoustic impedance, or so, just, technical things like that. And I was like, wow, this is actually giving good answers. But at the same time, these are, the LLMs are, it's based on what you feed it, right? Both on the query side, but also on the information that it's pulling from side. And the latter there is where I really see us, again, not just me, headphone show, but like people in the review space being useful still, right? Like providing the authentic, organic, real content that is that these LLMs pull from, and it's not easy to know how to do that, other than to just try and be as like comprehensive and correct as possible. Right. So doing due diligence when it comes to really understanding, hey, is this information that I'm putting out in the world, correct? Because if it's not, that's something that would be figured out pretty quickly. And then, whatever that is, would be, less featured by these platforms. So yeah, I mean, we have to do whatever we can to be that, authentic anchor for these models, because we're not going to go to a place where AI is not a thing again. Where it's the toothpaste is out of the tube. Yeah, we're already past it. So now it's time to figure out, okay, how can we actually use this stuff for good? How can we ensure that the recommendations people are getting from these tools are the best that they possibly can be? And I've seen this as well. Like when I was doing my brief look into how these things function. It's pulling from sources that it's pulling from YouTube sources where the information is good, and forum sources and wherever else, right? So it's only a matter of time before that also starts to look at, for example, headphone measurement data. Then that's a whole new can of worms, right? But as an example, I could see that being the next, or it might, as we're speaking, it might already be happening.
It's really going fast, for sure.
Yeah.
So on maybe on a final note, you've been doing this for quite a while. You did mention, the public self in a way, and your researcher side of yourself happening behind closed doors. And you've been doing that for a decade or more. So is there a lesson? What have you learned during this period of working with headphones, reviewing headphones, working in this industry? Is there like a life lesson that you can share?
No, it's basically all just sadness and depression. No, I'm joking. I can tell you there are things that I've learned about myself, through going through this process. And it's, in many ways, it's to understand that, for me, I must have some sort of pathology, not necessarily in terms of like the audiophile brainworms, but in terms of, getting addicted to a deep dive on something, getting addicted to getting into the weeds and really, trying to go as far into the rabbit hole as I can on something, and often not to my benefit. But it's funny because I think actually for a lot of people that I imagine in audio that resonates with a lot of people, because if you see conversations online in this space, it is also very much like that. Like the other people you talk to have also done a similar kind of thing. So in a way, it's made me learn, or made me realize about myself, just how overly focused on the minutia I can get. And it's something where, the learning process for me, I think, is trying to figure out when that actually matters. And maybe this is something that resonates with others in this space as well. But that's certainly the life lesson for me.
Interesting. Andrew, I think we're going to have to close this one up. It's been around 45 minutes. Andrew, thank you very much for stopping in Munich on the HiFi Munich show, shaking hands with me and booking this call. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And I really hope that we can do that someday again.
Yeah. Are you going to be in Vienna?
I will be in Vienna, and I will be on NAMM as well. I'm around. Yeah.
Okay. Well, hopefully I get to go into Vienna next year. So the Munich High End show is always so much fun. So it was great to meet you, great to connect with you, and this has been tons of fun too.